This is my reading review for Why Work is Sickening. All jobs used to be physically demanding and damaging, but as the years pass, jobs become more physically safe but still pose additional pressures that affect our mental health. While physical labor used to be the main concern in jobs in the past, we now are so much more concerned with the way that jobs affect our mental health than they do our physical health. In Why Work is Sickening, we get a look at both the physical and physiological pressures put on today's employees. In Work is Sickening, they start by talking about how jobs used to be very physically demanding, as I mentioned before, and how there was even new diseases that were popping up because of the work conditions in these factories. They were seeing these health problems that they never seen before, such as lung disease, dermatitis, and phosphy jaw, the death of cells in the jaw due to phosphorus exposure in the match industry. The article also brings these health problems back to capitalism, and as I quote it, it remains true that capitalist work harms our entire body minds through exploitation and the quest for profit. The article also starts by highlighting Amazon and the way they treat their employees and how you can see how they are really just caring about the profit and not so much the employees. There are multiple things that they discuss here, such as a lot of employees end up having UTIs because of the lack of bathroom breaks they're giving. Also, 40% of Amazon employees have experienced pain or injury at work, and of those workers who said they had acquired a serious injury, 80% said it was related to production speed or pressure. The article not only highlighting Amazon's work pressure, but also how a lot of their employees do happen to be poor or racialized workers. In extreme cases of this, we see 159 Apple workers who worked in India who were forced to live off of worm-infested food and rat-infested dorms with no running water. In these instances, we see more the physical aspect highlighted, more relating to how jobs used to be, but obviously still very much are today. But the article also goes into more of the psychological/mental health aspects of the pressures of work nowadays. The article states that 79% of UK workers report that they have suffered from burnout. And I would almost argue that burnout is a newer term. I think burnout really just applies to like students or employees who have a lot of pressures and a lot of expectations to meet. And expectations for both have been heightened a lot in recent years. Quantifiable productivity is valued so much today in the workspace, especially for those who rely on tips for their wages. As the article states, those who rely on tips are at a particularly high risk of depression and sleep problems because they don't have an assured payment. They have to rely on how good their attitude is and how much work they get done in a certain time or how many customers they have, so that means more tips acquired. The article also states that work stress was the 5th leading cause of death in the U.S. Diving deeper into this idea, we see companies notice these mental health problems, and so they give things like free therapy, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem. As this article also states, free therapy may make a round of layoffs less psychologically agonizing, but it does not prevent them from happening. While yes, therapy can be helpful, the true worry and the true emotional stress comes from people not feeling like they're doing well enough at their job, or they're not doing it fast enough, or they're just not meeting certain quotas. A lot of time those quotas being very unrealistic. In a similar fashion, in China, there was a factory where a lot of the employees would end up committing suicide, and rather than pay them more, change the work expectations, change the work conditions, they simply put up anti-suicide nets. Which, while yes, that does help, it doesn't help nearly as much as any of those other things I listed, such as working conditions or better wages or just better livelihood in general. I also want to mention that this is where we start to see, at least in class, the discussion of greed being an ingredient, which I don't think there's a better ingredient that fits here other than possibly racism, because I do think that a lot of these either physically or emotionally demanding jobs do end up to minorities, and they're most impacted by these types of jobs and these conditions. I found a more recent article online called Why Work is Sickening, literally. And they discuss the more quantifiable aspects of being productive in the workplace and the stress that it creates on employees. It discusses how people don't even realize they're working long hours, and once they kind of sit down and realize that they are, they're kind of like, well, why am I? Well, it's because everybody else is. Well, why is everybody else doing it? Well, because when you work more hours and longer hours, that's a sign of like loyalty and productivity to the boss, and that ensures that you keep your job, or maybe you get a promotion, or maybe you get an extra benefit. It's a like in today's world, the time you spend is very quantifiable to employers in a way that reflects on employees. This article also states how that doesn't really make any sense because working longer hours does in fact not mean better productivity. It also discusses how this state of mind really changes the employee from the whole like, do you live to work or do you work to live? And when you have to meet these certain standards, you end up becoming somebody who's living to work instead of working to live. And your time and energy is so much more focused on your work than any part of your personal life. The bottom line is, greed is so harmful in this scenario, and it impacts nearly everyone because nearly everyone has a job. And the root problem of these either physical or mentally damaging workplaces need to be reevaluated, and there needs to be a solution that targets more the root of the problem instead of things on the surface.